Right, welcome back everybody. Welcome to the Followers episode number, I forgot
48.
what episode it was again, 48. Exactly what I was thinking, thank you Murph. And today we had a very special guest. We had Rob Pacey from the Pacey Performance Podcast on, and it was super interesting and really good to get someone who's so far ahead of us in the podcast game, but see him come down. He was a really nice guy, really great to talk to, really down to earth, and some really, really interesting insights. What really struggled for me was, no matter how kind of technical we went into detail on, his answers were always still very simplistic, so he always brought it back to the basics quite well and kind of had actionable points, which was awesome to hear from a coach and just from someone else in the industry. What about you, John?
Well, he's 300 episodes ahead of us at the time of recording this, and even though we put out one weekly and he puts out one weekly, we are going to catch him. I don't know how the maths of that works, but we are going to.
Lay down the gauntlet now.
We really wanted to get Rob on because he did a survey with all of the British performance staff, but essentially people who work in S&C, in Premier League, Championship, League One, all the way down soccer in England, and to see how much they earn, what their route to the job was, what realistic things people need to know if they do want to go down that route. He just gives a really good breakdown, both in terms of what was in the report, but also anecdotally from his own experiences of going that route himself and from interviewing numerous coaches that have dipped in and out of that whole world.
Yeah, it's good to see we're not the only non-millionaires on the list as well.
Yeah, we're long enough.
But yeah, really interesting to see. I suppose a lot of things you'd kind of assume in your head, but when you see it on paper, see the exact percentages, it makes it a lot realer in my mind anyway.
Yeah, the route to the job, or how people got their job, was probably the most interesting bit. But when you think about it, oh yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, hope you all enjoy. So Rob, when it comes to podcasts, you're probably the OG at this stage. You're up there with Iron Radio, and they're near 1,000 episodes. Did I see number 347 yesterday? It's a far cry. You're about 300 ahead of us, I think.
I don't know about the OG, but yes, 340 something. Yeah, recorded up to 352, I think. Yeah.
You probably started before it was something that was well known, or I do this podcast. People are like, you do this what?
Yeah, that was exactly what I got. It was. You want me to do a what? You want me to write an article? No, it's not an article. It's me and you actually talking. How mad's that? Like two people actually talking. But yeah, it was 2013, back into 2013. And people didn't know what podcasts were. There was one in the UK, or one like sports performance one in the UK that I knew of. It was Brendan Chaplin, who runs the Strength and Conditioning Education and the S&C Level 4 certificate, and he was working out of Leeds Beckett University, which is half an hour from me, and he teamed up with Nick Grantham, who you might have heard of. Nick, I think he works at Newcastle now, and they kind of tag teamed a podcast, and I just thought I could do that. It's cool that I could do that, and just still blogging my way through. And that was December 2013, recorded on my phone, old, probably an iPhone 4 or something horrific, and just got people I knew. So it's been a long road. Everyone
else is just copying you now.
Well, that's you said that. Thank you.
And you started off like you were a semi-pro player at some stage, were you, in soccer? Yeah,
I was actually professional. So you've done me. I could give me a ball, and I've just knocked it out of the park. So thank you for that. So I did my first year at A-levels. So I thought my time had gone. I was coming to 16. All the players that had done well at the time had got signed for various different clubs, and I was stuck at my high school doing sixth form college and doing my A-levels. And I remember I did PE as one of my 4 A-levels that I took, and she was going around the class like, "What does everyone want to be?" There's probably only 10 or 11 of us on that physical education A-level, and I said I want to be a professional footballer. In front of everyone, it came out of nowhere, and she was like, "Right, okay. Who do you play for?" And I was like, "It was a team called Wakefield and Emley, and they were in the Unibond Premier League, which was probably tier 8. So like the bottom level of semi-pro. It was like 50 quid a week job, and I was playing their reserves." At 16, and she was like, "Okay," and everyone in the class kind of like shrunk with embarrassment that I'd said that, and it just came out of nowhere, and I thought, yeah, I actually do, and then a year later I'd signed as a youth team player at Doncaster Rovers, who were in League One at the time and had got 2 consecutive promotions, and was there, 3.5-ish years.
Sounds like one of the teams that, remember they used to do the LDV Vans Cup draw on Soccer AM. Were you in that?
100%. Yeah, 100%. It'll have been, Wakefield Emily, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'd have been like FA Trophy. It was not great. It was not great, but it was men's football, and I'd never played men's football before. It was always under 50, like work your way up, 14s, 15s, 16s, and all of a sudden at 16 I'm playing with men that have played a lot of non-league football, where it's brutal. Like guys are working all day, working all week, and they come on a Saturday and just kick lumps out of each other. And I'd never been exposed to that before. So I think it was a great thing to have a little bit of exposure to that.
Were academies as much of a thing then, or was it kind of you're expected to go somewhere semi-pro to build your way up, or how did it work then?
No, they were all academies. Well, academies were the top level, so Man United, Man City, Leeds United, they were classed as academies. And the lower level, so like a Doncaster Rovers, Brentford, they were classed as centre of excellence. So if you're in an academy, you were doing very well. But everyone else, a centre of excellence, they'd probably have 12-year-olds upwards, and you'd have a youth culmination in a youth team at under 18s. You'd have a reserve team, and then you'd go into the first team. So there was that stepping stone there. I just hadn't made it. Like I'd been for trials at Rotherham United, been for trials at Scunthorpe United, and never got in. I think that was when I was 14 and when I was 16. And just never been, well, the classic line was, "You're not as good as what we've got." So that was on your bike, see you later, try again somewhere else. And just persevered and in work Doncaster.
And ended up coaching at Doncaster then. That was one of your first kind of big S&C roles, was it?
Yeah, so that was a little obvious link to go back there. So I'd been a player there till 2007, July 2007 I got released. Ended up going back to do a sports science degree at Manchester Met, which was through the Professional Footballers Association, who thankfully paid for it, who do really good work for ex-players, by the way. I mean, they get slaughtered on social media and news outlets for various different things, but they have an education scheme for ex-players, and I tapped into that and got this degree sorted. But then I went to work in schools and played semi-pro, but I knew that I wanted to go back and be in that environment. It was not necessarily the job. It was about the environment that I wanted to be in. If I couldn't be a player, what was the next best thing? I started to do some of my coaching badges, and then ended up, I think I applied for an internship at like West Ham, when internships were just for the academies, like I explained earlier. Not many around, not very official. And didn't get a call back or anything. And then, because I knew the guys at Doncaster, same manager, same players from 4 or 5 years previous, they was like, yeah, just come in, it's fine, no problem. So I ended up going in for a day. A day led to me dropping a day at work when I was working in primary schools, doing PE lessons. And that ended up an unofficial internship for a day a week. So I used to go on a Monday. It used to be, can I swear now, by the way? Not that.
Yeah, work away.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, collecting piss from all the players, analysing the piss, throwing the piss away, cleaning the piss bottles, giving out drinks. What else was I doing? Like setting up gym sessions and just been around the place and kind of lapping it up again and really enjoying it. And then I remember sat in front of a laptop and we'd had some Polar Team 1 heart rate monitors. And anyone that's done anything like that before, any heart rate analysis, the Polar Team 1 are like, how can I describe it? Do you know them? Do you know when you went on holiday as a kid and you always come out with a big pencil? You went to Blackpool or you go to the coast, you come back with a big pencil. It was like having one of them big pencils strapped to you, like so stiff, horrible, uncomfortable, terrible. And I got taught how to plug these things in, and a graph would come up, heart rate trace would come up, and we'd clip it. So like clip the warm up, clip the like small sided game, clip the 11v11, and see what heart rates were like across the squad. And I was like, I have absolutely no idea what I'm looking at here. It's just a squiggly line. And I blagged it for a few weeks as if I was, we know what's going on here. And said to the guy, I haven't done any of this at university. And he started laughing, started pissing himself. So he's like, of course you haven't. You don't do this at university. This is not part of the course. You learn this on the job. So that was a bit of an insight into how much relevance my degree was going to have on a potential full-time job in sport.
Just briefly there, you mentioned the Professional Football Association. Is that something they do a lot? Is that kind of with a view to, okay, you don't make it as a player, or perhaps you get injured and they try and set up some other form of revenue or life path for players? Is that when you finish, or do they have an eye on players even going through their career to have some, like Premier League, they're probably making enough to survive afterwards, but lower down the leagues, are they like, okay, this isn't going to pay for you in your 40s and 50s or your children, let's have an eye on something else here?
Yeah, so anyone listens to Talk Sport, I do pretty much every day, and there's this conversation around unions, and one of the only unions around where no one actually pays a significant portion of their salary to actually fund the union. So from my understanding, it's the Premier League that fund a lot of the PFA, of the Players' Union. And I think I used to pay something ridiculous, like £75 a year. I only paid it for 2 years. So when I finished, and it's kind of once you're a member, you're always a member type of thing. So no matter how much you've paid into it, which was minimal, and probably is minimal for everyone, when you leave, or you retire, or you get released from full-time football, you can tap into this. And I explored it, and basically I got my degree. It was a part-time degree at Manchester Met, someone that they'd partnered with on a sports science front, and I think it was at $7,000 was the degree, and it was all distance learning, which wasn't really a thing at the time. It was all on paper and DVDs, but sent through the post. And I think, it's ridiculous. This one long ago. I laugh. It's funny because you're getting workbooks like that thick sent through the post, and this was 2010, 2011, not that long ago, and it was ridiculous. I ended up doing that degree, and it probably cost me about £600 because I had to top up a little bit of the amount that the PFA wouldn't cover because I'd got to my allowance. They paid for the rest. We were in a lecture theatre. There was quite a few like ex-footballers or current footballers, and they'd be all ask the lecturer or the admin person at the front was asking for the next payment. Make sure everyone's next payment's due. It's this much, and we're like, not for us, thank you. PFA had sorted that, which was great, and I tapped into them for I did my knee a couple of years later. Did my MCL and needed a scan, and was trying to get a scan here, there and everywhere, trying to get it sorted super quick. And I thought, the PFA, I should get in touch with the PFA. Rung the guy who was the kind of liaison guy that I used to speak to for anything. He said, can you get to Warrington? I was like, absolutely. My girlfriend was living in Manchester at the time. I said, when do you need me to be there? Can you get there tomorrow morning? I was like, yeah. Right, you've got an appointment. And that was just, they sorted it. They sorted the scan, got the results within a couple of days, and that was the PFA in a nutshell. So incredible organisation if you're on the inside, 100%.
Yeah, that's interesting, because we have a very different structure to the main sports in Ireland here, both hurling and football, and it's generally looked after through your club. But then there is the Gaelic Players Association, which do sort some elements of courses and stuff, and links to companies and that for players, because obviously most of them need a job because it's not professional. One of the big things we wanted to look at, Rob, was some of the realities of working as a strength and conditioning coach, because everyone sees it as it's just, I'll get a job at Man United, I'll spend my day hanging around with Rashford and Pogba, and they're making loads of money, so I'll obviously be making loads of money as well, and I'll be making them fit. It'll be great. Whereas realistically, there aren't a huge amount of jobs at the very top level, and as you start filtering down, the wages, the work demands, some of the working conditions and the job security aren't quite as brilliant as you'd often expect them to be.
All very correct. So don't get me wrong, there's people out there who have got a lot more experience working in pro sport than I have, and more recently than I have, because I left kind of been in it every day 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So a lot. I mean, it's fast moving industry. Things change, but I think what hasn't changed is the salaries that are knocking around. I mean, just one thing that I was talking about, one topic that I was talking about to someone recently. I applied for a job at Nottingham Forest in their academy in 2014, and I think it was between 20 and 24. And because I was travelling, I got offered the job, but because I was travelling from Huddersfield, which was quite a distance, probably an hour and a half either way, I was trying to negotiate the 24. Didn't end up taking it. It was just been too much anyway. But that job has come up multiple times this year I think it's between 22 and 24. So it hasn't moved since 2014. There is more jobs, don't get me wrong. There's more opportunities for people in a strength and conditioning capacity or sports science capacity than ever before. The elite, the EPPP, which is the academy system that runs now, has created more jobs. Because if you're a Category 1 or a Category 2 club, you have to have certain members of staff on your payroll in an academy to hit your criteria to stay in that category. The higher you go up, the less money that you get paid from the Premier League, the more you have to put in, the better the facilities have to be, the more staff you have to have, etc., etc. So that has created more jobs. But yeah, sadly, the salary for the jobs hasn't particularly moved.
Whereas the salaries of players, you can see it curving up quite a bit the last 2 years.
100%.
Transfer fees are curving up. I assume like managers' fees are going up, whereas support staff hasn't budged at all.
We're replicating a conversation I had literally yesterday with someone that's been in 15 years in a championship club and has left. Like in just general like national inflation, that money should be going up. It's not. The money coming into the game is going up, but that is not reflected. Players are getting more money. TV rights are going up, but that's just not reflected in staff salaries. It's just not. For whatever reason, is there a lack of understanding from administration of what these people do? I'd probably say yes. There's so many reasons. We could be here all day to try to figure out or surmise what the situation is. But the fact is, salaries are not going anywhere. And there's internships, unpaid internships. I think that's got better. There's not as much exploitation as there probably was 4 or 5 years ago. But still, I saw one this week, Ipswich Town, first team intern. And they'd done the right thing by calling it an internship when it was someone who's going through a undergraduate sports science degree. So probably a gap year, probably a sandwich year from a sandwich course. But it was 38 hours a week. And then I think it's put in brackets, required to do overtime should it be necessary or something.
I was going to say 34 means 64, really.
Never in a million years are you doing 38 hours a week. Not in a million years. No one at a football club works 30 hours a week. For no money. I don't know if it gave any other benefits. I don't know if it paid for some sort of CPD or anything like that. But yeah, that's the reality. You're doing 30 hours a week for a year for nothing. And then there's like preferable working with sports technology, experience of working with GPS. This person could potentially be 20 years old, is 2 years into an undergrad, and it's just bizarre. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Like you do see it in other industries, but it is a little bit kind of better kind of controlled. You see people like, we're looking for a graduate just out of college with like sometimes like 3 years experience. Like, wait, hang on a second. Those things don't line up. But I do feel that it's particularly it particularly stands out in the S&C industry that there's quite a lot expected of you to accept, like from a working conditions perspective there, from just a remuneration perspective there, that you're expected to give quite a lot of time for pretty much nothing at best, and in return you get all this experience. But still, you might come out of an internship year or even 2 years. Sometimes I've come across people who've had to take 2 internships, and then they start to be in a position to finally put themselves forward for that 20k a year kind of role, and you're like, where's, like, there's no attraction to keep you in this industry, but you end up doing crazy hours on top of it. I'm not sure, and obviously we're coming from different perspectives, but in Ireland, from my perspective, it doesn't seem to be getting better. It just seems to have plateaued at, like, if we don't if we don't cause too much of an issue here, or if we don't kind of, put our heads up above the parapet with what we're offering, if we don't make it look like this massively attractive role that nobody's going to, say anything to us. Do you feel it's a little bit like that too, or do you actually think there's a significant, I suppose, improvement?
First thing I'll say, and I think it needs to be clear, I think this is not only our industry. It's so many industries, but because we're in it, it's all about us. We've got, everyone's on our back. Everyone hates us. It's not the case. Like, I saw a job, it's an internship advert for, I think it was a finance company in New York. And obviously, traditionally, them industries, you're going to get abused, like literally abused. But it was an internship, full-time internship, and in brackets, what did it say? How did it word it? Was it a reverse internship? Where you pay $15 an hour to be there? Them kind of things are out there. And them kind of things happen in strength and conditioning as well, where you're paying $3,500-4,000 to do an internship somewhere under someone. It's happening. But is it getting better? I'm not quite sure it is. I'm not quite sure it is improving. But I think there's going to be at some point where undergraduates do go into their undergraduate degree with more information of, if I want to work in elite sport, there's probably not going to be a job out there for me. And they go in with a little bit more information. Hence, the salary report that I did was trying to arm people with the reality. And I've become, probably over the last, 5 or 6 years, up until quite recently, quite negative on this topic. And it does nothing for anyone to just beat this topic down. So I took a step back and thought, okay, I'm becoming negative. That's not good for anyone. That just fuels this just negative environment that young practitioners are potentially getting influenced by. So let's take a step back and let's actually get some reasonably objective data on it, which is where the salary report came from. And just to arm people with more information, more knowledge, more power, you can then make a better judgment on what you signed up for. Do you want to do it or not? Because if you go into a university and you look on the prospectus, and the one person that's made it to work in a professional club over the last 5 years, boom, on the front, like the one person or two people, and people get roped in by that. This would pay some, like I worked at the University of Huddersfield. There was one lad who came through it and worked at Huddersfield Town. He was on the front, of course he was. And it ropes people in. But there's probably, at Huddersfield Town, there's what? In the first team, there's probably 3 jobs for a strength and conditioning coach. In the academy, maybe 2. So you've got 5 in a championship club. Probably a bad example because they've set their academy up slightly differently. But they're the kind of numbers we're talking about. There's not hundreds and hundreds of jobs, but I think university is going to get paid depending on how many bums they get on the seats. And that's nothing against them. That's just how the model works. But at some point, you'd think there's going to be a tipping point where people are starting to ask questions. And I don't think that is too far away. You've got some big people in not only our industry, but other industries, I hate to use the word, but influencers, who are questioning university itself, unless you're a doctor or a surgeon where you need to go to university. But
preferably.
Stuff like preferably, yes, exactly. But for things like sports science, I don't know. There's a tipping point somewhere.
think as well, hopefully, anyway, the tipping point will come from a person who's been through one of these university courses and seen the job opportunities, but creates their own path. Like Jamie Reynolds kind of comes to mind essentially by just going, right, well, I have the skill set, and there's always going to be professional players who want to get better outside of their own training. I can do this, and he'd be the only S&C really that come to mind that would actually be, okay, he potentially could actually command a huge salary because he has individual people who he knows are super wealthy, providing them an individualized service. So I think the catalyst is going to, I do think you're right in it being a tipping point very soon. It'll just be very interesting to see what the next big avenue for S&C is or how it goes.
There's more people doing that. I mean, he's blazed the trail for that kind of route. I don't know if he ever worked anywhere near a club, but he got in with certain players, and then other players went to him for training, for external coaching from their clubs. There's more people doing that. I mean, you go on Instagram and you'll see players working with random coaches from all over the world, doing some good stuff, doing some funky stuff, doing some weird stuff. But yeah, in the UK, there's been more. There's one recently left one of the top 4 clubs, and that's exactly what he's doing. He's got some relationship with players, and you know the benefits of that probably outweigh the negatives of leaving pro sport.
It's even like a consultant role nearly for a pro sport club where you can work with many different clubs, commanding a much bigger wage with much less hours you're actually working. So it's just watching the industry evolve.
And the players want to be with you because they're paying out their own pocket. I mean, I was listening to a hilarious interview with Roy Keane and Micah Richards, who are absolutely unbelievable together. But he was saying about Phil Foden, and Roy Keane was like, he's got a chef. He's got a chef. And they were loving that, in fact, he had a chef. Like, it wasn't negative at all. But I'm sure there's people like him who will have a chef, their own physio, their own masseur, their own coach. Like, if you're on 100 grand a week, why wouldn't you do that kind of thing? Why wouldn't you have people that you trust around you? I mean, that'd be the first thing I did if I was on ever anywhere near. I'd get someone to cook your food for you. Happy days. What a drain it is anyway. But it's these kind of things that are creating roles for strength and conditioning coaches to tap into, if and only if they're happy to step away from the norm. And 95% of people won't, because it's just not in the makeup.
You would see a lot of NFL and NBA players who take an awful lot more responsibility for their own physical development, and that's possibly filtering across it. They will have someone,
Absolutely.
They look after my nutrition, they look after my physical, my team. Will they support me in terms of sport? But me as a commodity, I will look after that myself.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is very much a US mentality with the whole brand around these guys and how that's looked after. And that's filtered into their performance as well. And I think it is different, slightly different, because they have longer off seasons, barring probably basketball. So they're not allowed to contact the club in certain parts of the year, which mean they have to have external people because of the collective bargaining agreement and all that kind of stuff. But it'll be the same. It's going to be the same here, if not already.
The US system kind of lends itself well to it as well, because there's usually a franchise player where you're like, right, pretty much the team's on your back. So in the off season, you need to be preparing. Because I remember reading an interview with Michael Jordan and his trainer, what's his first name, Grover. But he said that, like, I don't pay him to coach me, I pay him not to coach everybody else. So we had him just on his own retainer to come through, and that kind of stuff is really big in the US as well.
Yeah.
Just before we dig into the report there, it is also worth bearing in mind that I am lucky to have this, but my day job is as a teacher. Once I got that, I did my 2 years, I have my contract of indefinite duration. That's it. Unless I do something outrageous, I have my job till I'm 65. It is the complete opposite the higher up the chain you go, because you're often tied to a manager or a head coach. You're tied to the results, and you can have them really fit, strong, durable, everything, but a couple of results go against your team, manager gets sacked, you're probably out the door along with him. So that lack of job security is another thing you do need to be very much aware of when you're heading into it.
100%, especially at first team level. I mean, first team level's a bit like the Wild West, because there's no EPPP, you don't have to have a minimum of masters to work at a first team in a first team environment. If you want to work in the academy, you do. There's lots of boxes to tick. But if you want to work in the first team, my mum could do it and no one would ask any questions. So it is a little bit like the Wild West. But if you do but then on the flip side, that's probably where you're going to make the most money. If you're attached to a manager, you potentially get on a coaching staff contract, which is a 2-3 years potentially. And if the manager gets sacked, you all get cleared out. But the chances are you're probably going to get looked after financially because you're on that kind of contract. If you're a club member of staff, where people are moving around you, managers are coming in, they're potentially bigger clubs going to potentially bring in their own fitness coach. You're probably always going to be a number 2, but you've got a little bit more security, and you haven't got the big ticket salary that goes with it. And then in the academy, that's probably emphasised again. You probably could be there for life. Unless you do something stupid, you're not going to get the boot, or that's what people thought until COVID and people are getting made redundant and whatnot. But yeah, I suppose that that's the hierarchy really. Academy, relatively poorly paid unless you're a head of in a category 1, and then moving up the chain to first team, and then first team with manager. Risk goes up, reward goes up. Yeah.
And that brings us on then to some of the various titles that we looked at in the report, that like what people's actual job titles are, whether that's been bestowed on them or they call themselves that, I have no idea. And what the real interesting thing to notice is the actual age group. Like, you have more than half the people who filled it in younger than 35, actually way more than half younger than 35 here.
No, 2/3, yeah.
Yeah, like that. Is that because you get to an age where you're like, I need more security, I need more job progression, I need a bit more free time to look after my children, whatever it might be, or you just become a little bit burnt out? Most likely a combination of a few.
And don't forget, it's a new industry.
Yeah,
like
true.
when I was playing in 2000, at Doncaster in 2007, strength and conditioning wasn't a thing. I mean, we were in League One. Yes, it was in the Premier League, but I would say that good championship, maybe a fitness coach, but yeah, even 14 years ago, League One, we didn't have a gym, no gym. Like I think we had a bench press and a leg extension in the canteen, like in the corner of the canteen. Seriously, like we're at a time. This is League One. You've got lads on a couple of grand a week, so doing well for themselves, who were coming in on a Monday still in the gear. They'd been out on the Sunday and stinking of booze. And that wasn't like applauded or people weren't patted on the back, but it was just like, bloody hell, so-and-so's been out again. Jesus. What are we going to do with him? It was that kind of mentality. So, and I think these last 20 years have been a shift away from that, with the influence of foreign managers, with just the professionalism, with the amount of money that's put into the game. Not long ago, that was just the norm. Like, out a few times a week. So we need to put it all into perspective. This is moving quick. This is moving super quick. And that's a reflection on the age of graduates and people, members of staff that are in these roles. People talk about salaries, but you've got, I don't know, Club X in the Championship or League One advertising a job at 20 grand. And you've got, it's, I don't know, 1 to 3 years experience. Does that person at 1 to 3 years experience actually have enough about them to earn 20 grand? People go, 20 grand, it's nothing, like they should be earning more. It's a new graduate, they've got no experience. They go into a club to potentially work with players who earn a lot of money and are assets, big assets to the club. Like, should they be on 20 grand? I don't know, but there's a bit of a disconnect, I think, with them kind of conversations, with what clubs are willing to pay, what expertise people have actually got moving into those. Just because you've got a master's, why does it mean that you have to earn 50 grand? Like, what have you done? So I think I need to be careful on how I kind of frame it, because it is easy to get sucked into that. I've done 5 years experience, I've got a master's, give me 50, where's my 50 grand? Why isn't it, why am I not getting paid that?
Does become important there as well, how we actually frame and measure experience too. Like 5 years of experience, is it 5 years where you were continuously building, or is it 1 year of experience 5 times that you just repeated and didn't really evolve in any way? And how you, as a potential employer, find out the details behind that can be quite difficult as well to justify the money that's then paid afterwards.
Of course.
On terms of age then, like realistically, if someone is in mid-40s to late 50s and has 30 years of experience, they probably spent about 10 years that being really poor and doing a lot of menial jobs. Whereas I think young graduates coming out now see the person at the top end, who's obviously very experienced and really knows their stuff, says, I've learned a good bit from them. I'm probably doing stuff that's reasonably similar to them. Should I not be around the same? But they're forgetting the years of work that went into getting there, and a lot of very small things that are learned quite slowly, but you can only go through them small things very slowly to get to the end position.
Of course, you've got this super, super wide bank of experiences that an experienced practitioner can tap into. And a younger practitioner, probably I was one of them at the time, thinking, well, I could do that. Like, that's not super hard or super complex what he's doing. But then mine was a very narrow experience, and all I'm seeing is what I'm seeing in front of me. Whereas the more experienced one, if something goes slightly different, he's got that experience. He's dealt with that before. And he can tap into the last 10 years, last 15 years to deal with that. Whereas I can't. I just see that thing that's in front of me because it's always always a new experience. So it can be you can get quite distorted in how you view a practitioner when you go see them. This is so simple. How have they been doing this? Like, there's nothing exciting here. It's just, you make a judgment, but it's all them other experiences that are underlying all this, what you see to be made simple, that I think for a younger practitioner is maybe hard to get the head around. And I think I fell into that confusing zone as well, thinking that I deserve more than I probably did.
And just looking then at people's levels of experience going into jobs, or particularly those that filled in the questionnaire anyway, that the prior internships here, you have 14% at zero. I'm very surprised that people have gotten to a stage where they did not have an internship. I'm going to guess they're a bit further up the age bracket, but I don't know. Yeah. Then you 43% have 1 and 28% have 2. I think 2 is a real nice number there, because you're drawn from experiences from different areas. You can take, you've probably learned from a few different coaches with different mentalities, different mindsets, and different overall processes, and it helps you as a coach yourself kind of develop that a little bit more clearly and critically in your head. Those then who are up at 3 and 4, I'm thinking, why didn't you really stick at one of those clubs? But yeah, what did you find there on some of the internships? Was that surprising?
I thought, like, I'm probably with you. Excuse me. I'm probably with you. Like, 2 internships. If they're a year long, you've got 2 years. That's probably a decent amount. And then at that point, you're going, okay, what's next? If after 2 years, I'm going, okay, what's next? Another internship. I'm maybe thinking there's something not quite right there. And 4, if it's 4 whole years, like 4 full seasons, geez, like there's an issue there, even with the person, or their ambition or ability to get a job. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, 2 is probably what I'd go for if I was a young person coming through. That'd be my expectation, 2 years. But yeah, I think it's the qualifications that are the bugbear for a lot of people. Like 2/3 of respondents had a master's degree. Probably a lot of them master's degree graduates were doing internships, and I think and probably unpaid internships. So that's the bugbear of a lot of people in the industry. I think that these highly qualified on paper people are doing probably testing piss every day, like I was, and probably not been too happy about it because because people frame it as 50 grams of the debt, when if you look at it, we're probably not looking at it the right way if you're classing it as debt. You're probably paying more tax is what it is. once you earn a certain amount. So that's probably reframing it slightly. And yeah, people think I've got a master's degree, therefore I should be expecting a certain amount of money when, like I said before, that's just not the case. Not the case at all. But in terms of internships, yeah, probably 2. Anything more, yeah, I'd be questioning what's going on.
I was surprised at the amount who had a master's degree and didn't have accreditation with any strength and conditioning body. I was very surprised with that. Like, you've 2/3 had master's degrees, but 57%, so nearly 2/3 again, didn't have any accreditation at all. I'd have, if like, okay, I'm not going through the English route, like, because I'm here in Ireland, we don't have our own specific accreditation. But if I did a degree, I would certainly look to probably do my UKSCA before I would look to do a master's, or certainly alongside it, as opposed to do those and then expect to have a job without having either NSCA, ASA, or UKSCA. That's something I find very surprising now.
Yeah, I think in football, the UKSCA hasn't been adopted particularly well. And I think that's from its foundations as an organisation, coming through the English Institute of Sport and been very heavily influenced by the people at the start when it was first formed. I think that's changing. I think people are slowly coming round to the fact that it is something that is worth doing in football, and I think that disconnect is joining, which is great. I've done questionnaires and got responses from rugby league and rugby union. Their number in terms of how many people are accredited in terms of percentage is a lot, well, not a lot low. I think it's in the 40% area. So it's been adopted again more in them sports because of its foundations, and foundations rooted in Olympic lifting or more traditional training techniques that maybe football is slightly different and the people in football see it slightly different. So I think there is probably a skew when it comes to football on that, but I think that is changing. But yeah, that's something that from the outside you'd think, like, what is going on there? Like, that's not right. I mean, this got picked up by The Athletic, which was really good. There was a really well written article. Adam Crafton, who's the who was the journalist on it, and we went through it together. And he was like, "No accreditation. Well, how did they know if they're any good?" Well, kind of don't. You go on experience. You go on references. Like, it's like, is a degree enough? I'm like, well, is it enough in anything? Like, if there's various different other industries where you're going to need something else rather than your, undergraduate and a master's degree. But I just don't think it's appealed to the football fraternity because of, like I say, the foundations that it's been built on and how relevant they think the training modalities that are taught are actually transferable to football.
It's always going to be a case of, as well, if you did bring in something at Premier League level, say, okay, everyone has to have their UKSCA, and someone comes in without it and their team does phenomenally well, everyone below that then just starts to question, well, sure, he doesn't have it, like, so why do the rest of us need to? Whereas if you had a few really influential S&C coaches at a few top clubs that were winning and they all had it, you'd probably just find them by proxy. Everyone would start doing it then.
Yeah, I mean, in the academy system, I believe you have to have a BASIS accreditation, which is British Association of Sport and Exercise Scientists. You have to have that accreditation or be working towards it. So, and that's only in the academies. Again, looking at the academies, it's a Wild West when it comes to first team, but it's a little bit more strict, bit stricter in the academies. But yeah, as far as UKSCA getting to that point, I don't think that's near there at this moment in time, unfortunately. But in the future, it may be.
No, I suppose my only thing on that was just like the ease of access into especially over the last years. You're going to have a lot of people who will be coming out with their qualifications or who are just finishing the thing. They'll be twiddling their thumbs. Like their careers are very much kind of pushed back, and you wonder how many people coming out with their S&C degrees, whether it's undergrad or master's level, will possibly have no choice but to move away from the industry. It's kind of something that I've spoken to a few people about, obviously anecdotally, but that they're like, I had things lined up, to once I finish this, I get my experience, and then I could move on. And now they're like, those opportunities are gone. But for some, like trying to go through basis accreditation, for some can be quite tough. For UKSCA as well. Like, I mean, a lot of that stuff is, it's a little bit beyond what people are capable of, especially over here. I'm only speaking from an Irish perspective here, that it just creates that awkward, it's not as straightforward. But I guess have you any kind of thoughts on how to make that kind of transition through to getting those accreditations any easier? Like, even if we take from a nutrition perspective, like that's a bit complicated as well. If you're trying to, like, it can be straightforward, maybe going through Center if your course is accredited, but if it's not, like, there's quite a bit of paperwork there. There's quite a bit of proof, which is often quite tough to demonstrate, I guess. But from an S&C perspective, how do you demonstrate that quality if you can't really get there in person?
Well, I think the UKSCA are actually coming up with a qualification. I don't think it's far away, that is going to bridge that gap between, well, nothing and accreditation, because I think that jump is big, and it's probably too big. And I think there's probably a naivety to a lot of it, because people just jump in and think they can smash it, think they can pass it first time. It's not the case. Like, the pass rate is so low because people just think they can blag it. And maybe it's, personal trainers who have been through, I don't know, a weekend course and think that's the next step, and just, it's almost like a tick box. You turn up, you do a couple of lifts and you get passed. Well, that's just not the case. Like, it is pretty rigorous. For various different reasons, but I think that bridging that gap between nothing and accreditation is super, super important, and I think that is coming. And I'm not speaking on their behalf, but I know that it is, and I think that will be a gateway for people to get on the ladder, show at least some sort of competence, but will also give people who are working as PTs, that will give them a point of difference, that will help the strength and conditioning industry try and manage all these people who are saying they're strength and conditioning coaches when they're just a PT, because they want to differentiate themselves. So I think that will be a big step forward. And if you're working in David Lloyd Gym and you are doing 8 hours a week with a few clients and you're calling yourself a strength and conditioning coach, when this starts to hopefully filter into the fitness industry, that person will be expected to have a level 2 in strength and conditioning through the UKSCA. Now, anyone can do it. Again, using Mum as an example, Mum could say she's a strength and conditioning coach and no one would bat an eyelid. So I think that is the next step. I mean, it'll take a little bit of time to filter in, but I think that is going to be a big step forward.
Obviously, logistically, I haven't put a lot of thought into this, but as an idea, it would be great to see something like the UKSCA involved in the internship program. So, for example, like, there's so many people doing unpaid internships, it'd be great if they could have that year either count towards their exam or working under an accredited coach. So they could come out, okay, fair enough, you've done a year, you put the work in, you've been unpaid, but at least you have your qualification or step 1 of your level 2 or something along those lines. Obviously, it would take a lot of development, but I think long term would it be a great system for the industry.
Again, I'm trying to speak for them here, but
Sorry.
I think no, it's fine. It's for me to manage what I'm saying. I think there is a portfolio part of that qualification that I mentioned, which potentially will help with that. I think that's what's coming. I think that's what's needed. I think that's been what's been asked of people in football. Like, I'm not going to coach Olympic lifting with my footballers, but I want to show my competence in a different way. Can I do that through a case study? Can I do that through a portfolio? Can I do that via you coming in to watch me? All these kind of things have been proposed, and I think that will be the way forward to be able to show competence without just turning up and doing the accreditation that's going to pass or fail me on an Olympic lift.
Yeah, definitely.
That would be my thoughts on that, and I think that will come. It has to.
Bit like the apprenticeship style model.
Yeah, I think so. And that's what Pacey is. Not that I've been through it, but I believe that that's how they do things in terms of a portfolio, and you'd work under someone who's basically accredited. And I think that would be the system that would be favourable, especially, again, for those in football who are questioning the applicability of the assessment for the athletes that they're working with.
Next bit I want to touch on, Rob, is probably what I found most interesting in the overall report is how people actually got their jobs. That
Fascinating.
the thoughts of, there's a job advertised on, I don't know, so say I'll go back to my teacher on educationpost.ie, I'll apply for it, I'll get an interview, hopefully I'll get the job. I do that maybe 5 times and I end up getting the job. Whereas like from knowing obviously other PE teachers and all of the other subjects they teach, the amount of people who actually see a job advertised, apply for it and get it is so few. It's always, I just called into the school one day, they were short someone for a few hours next week. I kept coming back. 2 years later, I'm on full hours. And that's how so many people actually get their job. The only time you may actually go for one that's advertised and get it is when you've about 5 years of teaching 2 hours away and you're looking to move close to home. That's when people actually get them. I've even noticed here now, from talking to people, younger people who are going for jobs, in Ireland, it has to be publicly advertised. It has to be. Majority go through Education Posts. If it's advertised in May, that's someone who's been working there for a year and it's being re-advertised because it has to be. Your chance of getting that are nil. June, half and half. August, the principal is scrambling because he wasn't able to fill it last June, or someone in his school has gotten a job somewhere close to home and he now needs to fill that really quickly. And being aware of that going in helps your confidence and everything so much. When, I didn't get that job, must have been a terrible interview. That job was gone a year ago. Relax, it's not down to you. You found reasonably similar in something like this, not to the same extent, but people who actually apply for a job and get it, doesn't happen all that much. 17%, I think.
Yes. Yeah, so the survey, this is a really interesting one. Again, this is the most fascinating part of it. Was I surprised? No. And a thing that I need to reiterate again, sorry if I'm going over all ground here, this is not just our industry. This is not just strength and conditioning. You can go anywhere and there'll be a similar picture. It's who you know, it's people getting you in, it's people putting a good word in. It's everywhere. My wife got her job because her friend got a new role at a new place. Leah, do you know anyone? Oh yeah, no, Charlotte's looking for a new job. She's in. She had an interview. Boom. No one else interviewed. Got the job. Thank you. So it's all them kind of things. It's everywhere. And she's nowhere near strength and conditioning. She designs children's playgrounds. So it's the obscure, exactly. The obscure of the obscure. This is happening. So it's, 38% of people got their current role through recommendations. So no publicly available job advert. 17% through club recruitment, through a publicly available job advert. Of those 17%, how many actually knew someone there and went, can you put a good word in for me? Probably quite a few.
Yeah,
how many of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So very few went in cold with nothing and got a job, I would suspect. And then one thing I will put a little star next to as I say this, 1% got offered a position after their internship / placement. And that's slightly misleading because that wasn't an option on the survey. That was classed as an other. So someone wrote that as an other, another way they got their current role. So quite a few of them could have been put under promotion. Because if I was answering that, I'd look at that as a promotion from intern to assistant or whatever it is. But someone's actually specified that they got offered the position after the placement. So slightly misleading. But still, in future adverts, that is going to be an option on there, because I think that's quite important to know how many people actually got jobs offered after internships. But yeah, fascinating little piece of info.
And 34% of people got promotions. So I would say, like you said, a good deal of those were internships that turned into full-time roles.
Correct. Yeah.
And only 3% move with managers. Now, just looking at where they actually came from, I'd say if you were to focus primarily on the actual Premier League, I'd say that'd be much higher. But as you go down, there's probably less moving with managers. I don't know. That's a bold statement.
Yeah. No. That's probably right. I mean, the thing that we need to remember is the people that answered the survey, there was no directors of in the survey, and they're probably the most likely to move with a manager. Maybe not a director of, maybe a head of fitness or fitness coach or someone from the country that the manager comes from. But I can guarantee none of them will have answered this survey. Guarantee. Because the average salary would have jumped very much if those kind of people would have answered this survey.
Possibly not even allowed. Like we've been in contact from a few from professional clubs, and like they send us this big long list of not allowed to ask about this, or this. So I would assume they're not going to like, oh, there's a questionnaire I'll just click on and give all this information to.
Exactly. I mean, I did contact a couple of directors of who were, thank you for sending it. It's not something I can do. The club don't want me to do it. Well, do you think the assistant is asking the club whether they're going to do it? No, they're doing it anyway. But the other directors of invested in it enough to be able to provide that information for the betterment of younger practitioners. Probably not, because they're not pissed off that they're getting shafted for salary. Is it on their radar to spend? I mean, I filled it in. It takes 20 seconds. It's all tick boxes. So time's probably not an issue. So yeah, it was a little bit frustrating, but it's the nature of the beast when you do something like this. People aren't going to want to fill it in. But yeah, we struggled to get directors of, unfortunately.
Was there many, just on the report, it's kind of a niche question now, you may not have actually even looked into it, but for that promotion section, was there many or an option for people who were maybe coming to the end of their playing career and just maybe shadowing as an S&C or just transitioning into that role, just maybe without any qualifications?
Yeah, no, there wasn't. There wasn't, unfortunately. And I'm just trying to think if I can actually think of anyone. There's one particular person who came straight out of playing and went to be a fitness coach. Don't think he's got any qualifications. But no, I didn't. But I can't think of any one that I would know of who that's happened to or happened alongside, especially getting a paid role. And bear in mind, this was only for people who were getting paid. So this was not an internship. Interns were not in this, because I thought it might skew it.
Yeah, definitely skewed the salary metric, all right.
Yeah, exactly.
20,000 zeros.
Yeah, even though interns did fill it in. But even though on every page it was like, if you're not getting paid, do not fill it in. Interns fill it in.
And just looking down at, like, realistically, salaries aren't unbelievable as you go trickle down a little bit, and job security isn't great. So people either, to supplement their salary, start working some kind of other job or run some kind of other business, or look to transition their way into another area. What are some ways you've seen people do that? I know you've done it. I've done a tiny bit with Kieran Deely and his Deely Sports Science. He's looking to use that to supplement alongside a full-time job. You were on with him one day as well.
Yeah,
it's brilliant if you've worked at Man United, and Robin Thorpe is doing something kind of like that at the minute. If you've said, 5 years at Man United, won a Premier League, a Champions League, and now I'm here to coach your team, like, that's a brilliant advertisement for you. If you haven't been at a very elite level, or you haven't built a profile, it is that bit more difficult to build a side stream or side business or transition onto a new type of business like that.
Yeah, I suppose it is if you want to work at elite level, because maybe elite players aren't going to take you seriously if you've not worked at a similar standard to what they have. However, I know one fantastic example of one guy who did, I think he was an assistant at a club in London. Now he's working with lots of different Premier League players, England players. So he's got something that they've tapped into. But I think if you're looking to earn some extra cash and you've done an internship at, I don't know, Brentford, I don't know why Brentford keeps going to my mind, but Brentford, when they're in the Championship or League One and you want to earn some extra cash, why not work with a semi-professional football club doing some pre-season programming for them? Or, I don't know, Janet, the accountant, who earns 70 grand, but she's overweight. She wants to pay £60 an hour to a personal trainer. Well, if I'm Janet the accountant, I'm pretty quite impressed if someone's worked at a professional football club. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it sounds cool. So I'd rather pay someone who's worked at a pro club with players than a PT that's worked in David Lloyd for 20 years. I don't know. I'm just having a little think, but there's loads of options. But I think what holds people back is people's ego to want to work with the elite of the elite. And as Des Ryan says, and has mentioned many times when I've spoken to on various different mediums for the podcast or masterminds or whatever, and this is his language. There's a position in every parish. There's a conditioning coach position in every parish, and that I could not agree more. I live in I don't think it's even a village. There's probably 50 houses, and every Wednesday night there's a class across the road, and they do a fitness session, and it's a random guy that's put leaflets through the door, and there's middle-aged men, middle-aged women, older men, older women who turn up there and pay £5 for 45 minutes. Like, he's doing all right. He's doing all right. They're probably, I don't know, how many did you get? 15, 16 people in a tiny little village like ours, paying £5. Decent, not a bad hourly rate, that. I mean, you can't, it's not particularly scalable, but if you're earning a very, very small, if you're earning a below average salary based on this report, and you're doing that a couple of times a week, happy days. Happy days. Not elite level athletes, but you're in front of people, you're engaging with people, there's lots of different skills that you're actually developing that are not, but you can't put it on Instagram and say that you're working with a top elite pro, but you're getting money in your pocket.
Yeah, two things there. I first on, with maturity comes realization that reasonably steady income is far more important than going to work with an elite level Premier League footballer, even though that could be gone in the morning and you might be making a pittance and putting in 60, 70, 80 hours a week. The other one then was the actual social media side of it. Some people put huge effort into growing their social media, thinking it will directly lead to income streams or multiple revenue streams from their coach, but realistically a large following may just be that, a large following, and having loads of likes of engagements might just be that. It doesn't lead to like there isn't a salary for having 20,000 followers. You do then need to have a plan to actually turn that into money in some way.
Absolutely. I think people 100% think that Instagram or Facebook pay people when you've hit a certain number. I know for a fact that people think that. Like, you get 10,000, you get, I don't know, 1% per follower. I don't know what they think, but that is genuinely, I think, what people think. Yeah, it's the whole social media thing. We could do another 2 hours on the whole social media thing and how that is influencing what we're seeing, what we're learning, and whatnot. But yeah, I think people think of the recognition, again, maybe the ego coming into play first, and the quality and the substance come second. A lot of the time, it's about being. I just read something earlier, and I think it was an athlete's birthday that a certain coach had worked with, and it's, of course, on Twitter, it's a picture of coach and player from 10 years ago, arm in arm, saying happy birthday. Like, why does it have to be that? Why, if you're going to say just say happy birthday, or don't, because the player doesn't know who you are anymore. You've moved on, they've moved on, and just get on with your life. But it's the search for likes and whatnot. So it's, again, we could go down a rabbit hole of talking about social media for another hour, but I don't think people will listen to me rant about that.
It's like the Facebook happy birthday to your granny who's not on Facebook.
yeah, exactly. So there's wow, we could go on all day.
Yeah, no, and we're very conscious of your time. Just on the revenue streams, and you say, or Des says, there's a job in every parish, but it's often about finding your niche, because even to finding the jobs and to doing fitness classes, that's becoming reasonably saturated now with more people trying to do it. But finding a niche area that you are particularly good at, whether it be you're really good at developing speed, you're really good at some form of injury prehab or whatever it might be like that, and finding that and pushing that is probably a better way, with a level of diversification there, of guaranteeing some form of long-term income, as opposed to spreading yourself too thin and trying to be too many things at once at the start.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if I was on a below average salary based on what we're seeing in this report, and I wanted to earn a little bit of extra money, but I wanted it to be on my terms. This is genuine as well. There is a golf course about 2.5 miles away from me, 3 miles away, and they've got, 18 bays, and they've got a coach. There's a coach who's there pretty much all day in 2 of the bays. He has clients coming from all over the country. Some even fly in to see him. He used to work under Pete Cowan, who's one of the top golf coaches in the world. Did an internship under him, set up on his own. What I would do, I would rent some space off him, which he'd probably give me it for free. Rent some space off him, get a squat rack, get a few dumbbells, get a few TRXs, get a pull-up bar, get some basic stuff, even lease it or rent it or do something. I'd tap into that golf coach and say, we'll do a discount for people that want to work on developing the drive, developing whatever it is, golf-specific stuff, golf-specific goals, and linking with him to train people. Like, that's to me, that's not a difficult thing to do with a little bit of outlay and a bit of a forward-thinking mentality or entrepreneurial mentality. And he's charging 60 quid an hour. So 60 quid for the half hour for golf lessons. Normal, very normal. Like, I think he's reasonable in that kind of line of work. So you get people and you go, all right, top it up to 100 quid. We can do an hour and a half strength session an hour session after your half hour golf session, and we'll do both for 100 quid. Like, happy days. You're going to get people tapping into it. You've got a middle-aged market who've got more disposable income. You've got people who are coming through the day because they're either retired early, they're just so mad for it that they're taking time off work. All these kind of things come into play. But there's opportunities there if people think outside the box.
It's also, I suppose, from the golf coach's point of view as well, like, there could be some people where losing 5-10 kilos could do more for their swing than he ever could, just from like a logistic or
100%,
from
100%.
mechanics point of view.
100%. And these kind of things, these guys will turn up with, $5,000 golf clubs and, 400 quid shoes and this and a 100 quid glove and all these kind of things. They're piling money into it because they've got disposable income. They don't know where to spend it. It's like the cycling community, the triathlon community, all these kind of things, like early to middle-aged guys and girls who have got disposable income, they just don't know where to spend it. They're buying Whoop bands because they've seen Rory McIlroy. They're buying this, they're buying that. Like, tap into that market, surely.
That's been brilliant, Rob. Just really conscious of your time. Just to finish off, if you've any, from like speaking to an awful lot of coaches and being aware of how the industry works, what advice would you have for any people who are in college, going through it, or coming out the back end to say, what are some not S&C specific skills I should possibly look to develop that would help me, in a way, be a better coach, but more so help me get a job?
I think more and more people now, recruiters, employers, are looking for, and it's a bit of a wonky term, but cognitive diversity. Keeps coming up on podcasts that people that I speak to all the time. People are looking for something different in their staff than what they've got. And I think having something different that you can offer. So, for example, if S&C job goes out and it's assistant strength and conditioning coach, it's 15 grand. There is hundreds of people that will fit that bill. Undergraduate, working towards UKSCA, and 1 to 3 years experience, for an example. Loads of them. But if you can code, you're going up against a very different level of applicant than if you were just a coach. If you have travelled to Australia for a year and done various different visits to various different professional teams over there and have pulled together a slideshow, a PowerPoint, of all your findings, that puts you in a different league to the norm. If you have set up a local gym in line with a local golf coach and are now offering golf sessions to clients, that's different to the average strength and conditioning coach. So it's all these little things that can add and differentiate you from the hundreds and hundreds who are probably going to go for that job. And it's just something different. It's been, I can't remember where I robbed this from, but I will have robbed it from somewhere. Be interested, so be interested in people, but also be interesting. And I think there's plenty of people who would just lack a little bit of personality. And that comes from having different experiences, going to Australia, visiting people, going to America, going around a couple of colleges, meeting people, chatting with people, just living abroad. I don't know, do something different. That's the only way you're going to stand out from the crowd, as well as having a decent network as well.
The be interested is a great way to develop that network that you could
100%.
I assume someone was an S&C coach with Thomas Tuchel when he started coaching back in 10, 11, 12. If he got on really well with him, you could now be a Champions League winning coach just because we got on well. He knows the stuff S&C wise. That's grand. But I just really get on with him and I keep bringing him to job.
Trust.
Yeah.
Just build trust with someone and they'll pull you along and you'll pull them along as well. Yeah.
Rob, absolutely fantastic. You've been brilliant with your time. Do you want to give your old podcast or anything else like that a plug there, or any other stuff you're hustling at the minute?
Nothing to plug here, mate. Don't worry about that. I appreciate your time. Thank you for asking me to come on.
Thanks a million, Rob. That was great. Rob.